cover 4 issues in the next 10 minutes. For a bit of time, I want to talk about the progress of the pandemic around the world and give you my latest assessment of what's happening. Then I want to just summarize some of the things we've learned that are helpful in making sure the response is effective. Then I'm going to go to what now, and then if there's time, I want to talk a little bit about you and how I believe you make such an important difference. So the progress of the pandemic, quite simply, it's continuing to grow. The places where it's growing the most change from month to month, but it's absolutely not coming down. It might be peaking, we're reaching a plateau, but as we've seen before, it can very easily pick up again. And so where is it bad? Well, United States and Mexico are still very, very hot. Europe is calmed down a bit the last 2 weeks thanks to intensive movement restrictions. South Asia still quite busy. The Africa quiet, and East Asia also pretty quiet. Huge impact of the movement restrictions in Europe. They really have reduced things right across the board. I'm seeing 3 patterns of responses by countries. The first response is what I call hold it at bay. That's when a country organizes to stop the virus from spreading. There are about 24 countries in that situation. Most of them are in East Asia. There's also New Zealand and Australia. In Africa, there's Senegal and South Africa most of the time. In Europe, the best hold it at bay country is Finland. And then Canada, in some places, doing well, some places is having some difficulty. A hold it at bay country, from a policy perspective, is doing everything possible to stop the virus from gaining a toehold. And if the virus does start to transmit, then there's quite intensive localized action to contain it, suppress it, and then get rid of it. Very important that I keep telling you about the hold it at bay countries, because the fact that we've got countries that are doing well in our world and that they have a mix of political systems is an important example to the rest of us. The second group of countries in what I call the ebb and surge pattern. By ebb and surge, I mean that there are periods when the virus is picking up and transmitting, and then there are periods when the virus is slowing down and transmission is reducing. And it's usually, these countries are usually the ones that have adopted a strategy to deal with the virus that is based on restricting people's movements, limiting their behavior, and then when things get really bad, requiring them to stay at home. So ebb and surge is the predominant pattern in Western Europe. It's also found to varying degrees in the Middle East and in North Africa and parts of Central America and South America. In fact, overall, there are about 100 countries in various forms of ebb and surge. And the European situation is that, having got the numbers down, governments are beginning to release their restrictions, and the numbers will build up again probably a month to 6 weeks after the Christmas New Year holiday, and then the governments will be faced with further questions about whether to go into lockdown again. The third pattern, again, a smallish number of countries there, about 10, are what I call the surge countries. These are the countries that have not really managed to get the incidence to drop. They've been having a gradual increase over time. In that group is the United States, Mexico, Brazil, 1 or 2 African countries, 1 or 2 countries in Eastern Europe. And these are countries that have basically said that they're not going to try to reduce incidence, that they're going to wait until some new technologies come along to get rid of the virus. What I've been trying to do is to concentrate on getting countries that have got the ebb and surge pattern to move into the keep it away pattern because it's only the keep it away countries that are able to maintain full economic and social activity despite the fact they've got the virus as a threat. And we see that particularly in South Korea, in Japan, as well as in Vietnam, Cambodia, Thailand. That is, we believe, the desired pattern for the future. Just if we look at the United States, more than 100,000 reported infections every day for more than 25 consecutive days. The numbers of deaths are above 2,000 a day. And following Thanksgiving, we reckon there will be a further surge. In the countries that have done well, the leaders are at least as often women as men, and they have strong focus on public health, and they also have tended not to let political divides get in the way of their pandemic responses. Now on to some learnings. I mean, we really didn't know much about this virus in January when I started working with Dr. Tedros. We've now learned that a lot about its transmission. We've learned that it is primarily droplet spread. We've learned that there is long COVID as well as the COVID that leads to sickness and death, with long COVID affecting between 1 in 30 and 1 in 20 people, and in some cases causing a really unpleasant, lengthy debility with fatigue, shortness of breath and other problems. We've learned about the importance of testing and tracing. We've learned that there is a great need to be in contact with people always to try to get the virus under control. We've learned that behaviour change is possible. We reckon that between 50 and 70 people have changed their behaviour quite significantly as a result of COVID. We've learned that you can reduce mortality quite dramatically with good quality medical care, but that there's still a need for more rapid tests. We've got vaccines. If I was to give a summary of my own view on what we've learned about containment, it is the people are the solutions. Trust is the key. You need to organise local communities to be able to respond and connect them together. You do need strong public health services. You need well-organised incident response teams to deal with surges at local level. Then you have to have good cooperation between national actors and local level actors. And that unless your responses are in an integrated system, it's not satisfactory. So what's now? What's going to happen? Well, we've got some vaccines. One has been licensed for emergency use by the UK. It's likely to get some form of license from the European Union a bit later. It may well get a license from the FDA. In fact, there are two going to come before the FDA. So these vaccines are going to be available, not in very large amount at the beginning. I want to stress, these vaccines will not in themselves stop the pandemic. They will reduce some of the suffering, particularly for people who are in great risk, because they will reduce disease. But we don't know what impact they'll have on transmission. So we're saying, please continue with physical distance, masking, hygiene, self-isolation when sick, protecting the elderly and vulnerable. Please continue to interrupt transmission by making certain that when cases are there, they're identified and that people are isolated and isolated well. The contacts are traced and they're isolated too. Please make sure that those who isolate do not have financial penalty. Be ready for vaccines to roll out. It will be quite clumsy at the beginning because the logistics of rolling out vaccines that have to be kept cold are not easy. And the first vaccine to come out is likely to be the one by BioNTech and Pfizer, which needs to be kept at -60 centigrade or -90 Fahrenheit. But it's going to be a very, very big shift. It's just all I'm say to people is, because it will take time for vaccines to stop the pandemic, to get up to the level of vaccination that will really reduce transmission, you must keep going with the non-pharmaceutical measures. And all of you, with your companies, must keep encouraging these non-pharmaceutical measures. If you're able to encourage hygiene, please do so. If you're able to encourage physical distancing, do so. If you're able to support people when they wear masks, do so. If you're able to help with isolation, do so. And if you're able to really bring people's attention to the challenges faced by older people or people with concomitant illness, please keep making it clear, because we will need to go on treating this virus with respect, at least until late 2021 and probably into 2022. There are going to be challenges with vaccines only being available in decent amounts for rich countries, despite the fact that we have a quite good system for increasing the access of poor countries to vaccines. It's not well enough capitalized for it to be able to get the level of vaccines into poor countries that's going to be necessary. And there is going to be a risk of quite a lot of frustration about the inequities in vaccine access. And we've got to be prepared for a period, at least, of considerable international frustration, that there are two classes here. There are wealthy nations who are able to move ahead quite quickly with adopting these new vaccines and getting their systems better organized, whereas poorer countries are going to feel left behind. Thanks very much indeed.
So thank you very much, Dr. Nabarro and Richard. Good morning and good afternoon, everybody. My name is Kirsty Graham, and I lead the Global Health Practice and the Global Public Affairs Practice here at Edelman. I just wanted to let you know the Q&A feature at the bottom of your screen. We imagine that many of you have questions, and please use that feature so I can start to draw from the questions you'd like to pose to both Dr. Nabarro and Richard. Can I begin by just saying we're clearly at a new point on this issue where we have the optimism and the sense of hope that is coming with the progress we've made with vaccines. And we also know, as you pointed out, Dr. Nabarro, that we have to stay committed to the safety and the protocols around social distancing and mask wearing, especially as we see the numbers hitting many parts of the world right now. So can I begin with a question to both of you about the enormity of the comms challenge that we're going to face, both with employees and with members of the public, around getting information and education around vaccine options? What do you both think business needs to think about as we enter this phase? And I'll begin with you, Dr. Nabarro.
Thank you very much indeed. I mean, the communications challenge is already coming up because each time I'm involved in sharing with people through the media or with companies through webinars the news that we have, I'm often invited to focus on how things are going to change and go back to normal as a result of vaccines coming on stream. And I'm having to say to people, look, we'll get a bit of vaccine coming up soon, and that will enable people who are most at risk to have a reduced risk. But actually, we're not going to be denting this pandemic for quite some time. Perhaps in advanced countries, we might see the numbers really coming down towards the end of 2021. But in many of the poorer countries, it's longer still. So I want to just really stress to you that is, for me, a big challenge. The second challenge is that there's going to be people who are going to say we don't want anything to do with vaccine, and we're told they're quite a large percentage of the population. My answer to that is don't hassle people, don't force people, don't make people feel bad if they are just not willing to take a vaccine. Instead, treat them with respect and just be patient, because I think a lot of those who are being hesitant will shift to saying they want a vaccine after a period, perhaps 4 to 8 weeks. And so we should be ready to offer them a vaccine for uptake perhaps 2 or 3 times, rather than just say you get it now or you've lost it completely. Thank you.
Kirsty, I want to talk about research that came out this week in the U.S. from Frank Luntz, who's a conservative pollster, going back to W. Bush, etc. What he found is fascinating to me on the importance of words and language. So things that don't work in terms of language are lockdown, mandate, and COVID incidents. What does work is personal responsibility, protocol, and number of deaths. And so what I take from that is people want not to be ordered, they want to be asked. They want to be informed and then make the decision. So what I take from this as to proclivity to take a vaccine is, let's put the facts in front of the people. Let's give it to them in a way that they can further, research and do their own digging if they want. But we also need to have credible sources, and they can't just be the traditional ones. Yes, my doctor. Yes, the CDC. But also black churches, for example. People who are advocacy groups and those who are close to me. So we've got to inform those who are going to be advisory to those making the decision. And lastly is the privileged role of my employer. We're working on a program with Merck and the World Economic Forum to talk to employers about how they should talk to their employees. We're not going to get from 0 to 100 immediately. So we need to start the education campaign now. What happened with the clinical trials last week? How did that work? Who's in the trials? Why is it sensible for you to consider vaccination? And, side effects. Let's deal with whatever questions there are, because there are going to be many of them. And we need this kind of interactive, two-way discussion.
So I think you've both made extremely good points on the trust piece and on the language piece and how we approach this, also from a science perspective. And Richard, it's great that you raised the points around the work that Edelman is involved with both the World Economic Forum and here in the US with the Ad Council in terms of how do we get the most amount of information out to people. So we've got a lot of questions coming in already, and I'm going to go to you, Dr. Nabarro. Question, I'm going to give you two actually. How did science go faster this time? And what would be the overall timeline, do you think, to reach full vaccination? I know you touched on that earlier, but if you could take those two questions.
Thanks very much indeed. First of all, I think scientists decided that they had to cooperate on this because the challenges are so huge. But they were helped to do so by journals being much more relaxed about their pattern of publication, companies encouraging scientific cooperation, actually in some cases being very generous, and governments making a lot of effort to encourage scientific cooperation in most settings, not everywhere. We have one or two places where it was blocked, but that was usually explicable. I mean, there's an enormous amount, I think, to learn from this. I mean, it shows that scientists don't have to be in competition, that they can collaborate. And in fact, many of the scientists I've spoken to on therapeutics, on diagnostics, and on vaccines have really enjoyed being more cooperative than usual. And that implies that there may be other incentives that one can offer for scientific cooperation going beyond where we are now. Now, what's the timeline towards full vaccination? It depends really whether we're talking about individual countries or the world. I think some of the countries in Western Europe and North America will reach full vaccination before the end of 2021. And it depends a bit on how efficiently they're able to handle the logistics, and it depends on the level of vaccine hesitancy. If we actually look at the world, I think that full vaccination will take until 2023 even, but certainly until 2022. It's a massive logistical challenge to get vaccines everywhere. And certainly if we're working with super cold vaccines, but we'll have some, I think, vaccines that can be kept in fridges for a reasonable length of time coming on stream quite soon. But the reason why it just takes so long is the logistical process of getting everybody immunized is huge. We've not succeeded with anything except for smallpox. Polio has been a bit stalled. We hoped we would get to full vaccination even 2 or 3 years ago. It hasn't, and measles is going backwards. So I'm not wanting to say that it's going to be an easy thing. And with the current state of international cooperation, I think it'll be quite difficult to finance as well. So for the world into 2022 and even longer.
Okay, and actually just two follow-up questions there. What would be your key action for the ebb and surge countries? And secondly, are there lessons for other countries in what China has been doing?
Yeah, so we'll start with that. You see, China, along with Taiwan, South Korea, Japan, Singapore, this is a group of countries that have invested in building up the defensive infrastructure to stop the virus from taking hold. And when it does take hold, to basically work hard to get rid of it by interrupting transmission, being very strict about the isolation, and by having really strong popular engagement. You have to have single-minded leadership, Jacinda Ardern style, and you have to have really well-organized local level cooperation between all the public health actors and community leaders and so on. It is doable. It's not impossible. It can be done within liberal democracies. You don't have to have a very vertical political system to do it. You can do it, but it requires leadership. And it requires unequivocal, consistent leadership with excellent communication that focuses on building trust. If I had one thing to say, it is this issue of trust, is what Richard was talking about. Without trust, you cannot do this properly. And if you've got leaders who are just incapable of fostering trust because they can't maintain consistency, because they're so focused on themselves and their interests, or they've got other issues, that's no use at all. If we can do anything to make the world a place where it's going to be able to deal with these kinds of threats, we really, really must promote trust. And that's why the model of East Asia is one that has to be looked at by the rest of the world. And if I want to encourage the countries that are going ebb and surge to just get into a better space, it is to build that local level infrastructure with public health and to make sure consistent, trusted leadership is the dominant form that is demonstrated.
Personally, I think within the ebb and surge markets, there's a great potential trap for business, which is either they take the model of March through May, where they put their heads down and let government lead altogether, or they say, look, we're going to reopen, and we're, because that's what's necessary in order to keep people working. And I think both of those are bad choices. For me, the right place is to say, we are going to do health safety checks. We're going to have a protocol that enables us to go back to having cruise line business or whatever it is, putting labs onto ships. Or we're going to have, for example, our client Hawaii is insisting that people be tested before they get on the plane to come to Hawaii, and that they're going to get tested while they're there again. So it's changing the game and not putting your head down and just letting government do it, nor is it being Rambo-like and putting your cowboy hat on and saying, damn the torpedoes, full speed ahead. That's crazy, because business is going to get blamed if there's a surge. Believe me that it flips back on, well, government, we were unable to do it, and then you get blamed. So don't do either of the extremes. Go in the middle and focus on health safety checks.
Okay, so that I think you make some very good points. I'm going to come back to that one, Richard. Another science question for you, Dr. Nabarro. How long will the vaccines be effective? And if you've had the vaccine, can you still spread the virus?
Okay, first question. As with so many things, we don't know, but we suspect, okay? So we suspect the vaccines will, in younger people, be effective for a full year, perhaps longer, but then a booster will be needed. In older people, it may be a bit less. We just don't know for sure. And that's why there is such a lot of interest in how well older people will be protected. The reason is we don't know what the endpoint is. Up till now, in the tests, the endpoint has been, do you get COVID? And so they just simply compared groups of people who received a placebo and groups of people who received the vaccine, 2 shots. Do you get COVID? Yes, no in each group. What they weren't able to do was to look at the duration of protection, because it just hasn't been going for long enough. But based on other kinds of studies of immunity, we think that there is a decline in immunity, just has to be tested. That was duration, and the second question
if you've had the vaccine, can you still spread the virus?
So that was not studied in the trials, and the current feeling is that if you are vaccinated, you may still be carrying the virus even if you don't have disease. Although you may not have a huge amount of the virus in the way that you do if you've got a nasty chest, you may, under some circumstances, be able to transmit. So we're saying that people who have been vaccinated still have to behave as though they're able to transmit the virus, which is dull, but that's the current wisdom that we have. And it'll stay like that until we've got more evidence.
Thank you. We're getting some questions on the media angle and fake news. Question for you, Richard. What has caused the failure and decline of media and journalism so that we've lost a sense of trust in the media? And Dr. Nabarro, if you have any comments on that afterwards on the fake news aspect. Richard?
It has about 3 or 4 component parts. The first is the business model. And the reality that advertising has moved away, particularly from the newspaper sector. And that has caused a reduction in force, in many cases of 50% or more in the journalist ranks. And that has also caused a diminution of specialization within the media, such that there are very few health reporters. There are general purpose reporters or public affairs government reporters. And so we also see, frankly speaking, a decline of journalists in the middle. You know, if you're left, you get clicks. If you're right, you get clicks, but you don't get clicks in the middle. And there's also A/B testing with headlines, and you know, there's more sort of sensationalism. And unfortunately, the news cycle is driven by tweets, and it's also driven by cable news. And so the authoritative kind of deep digging journalism has been supplanted by what I call newstainment, some combination of entertainment and news. So again, this is where companies have a very important role to fill an information void with quality doctor-led content from your chief public health officers or otherwise, such that your own people know what's going on so that they can talk horizontally. Remember, you are the most important source of information. My employer is the thing, more than newspapers or mainstream media, and much more than social. So please take that responsibility on your shoulders and do it frequently.
Dr. Nabarro, any ads from you on that? And also a question around when will we not have to social distance and not wear masks after vaccination?
Thank you. First of all, this is a disease that has a low death rate. Only around 1% of the people who get COVID in the Western European and North American markets, and possibly 2% in some other parts of the world, are actually getting seriously ill and dying. That's a very low proportion. If 10% of the people who got COVID died, I think it'd be much easier to get the public and the media to take it seriously. But it's the low fatality rate that makes it super hard for people to believe and understand. So an awful lot of folk, I must say, including myself, from time to time find it hard to make sense of what seems an unbelievable situation. As I once said, it's worse than science fiction. In addition, governments are having to make really tough decisions. This virus tends to kill old people. There's often a sense that these old people are going to die anyway quite soon. Why are we making all this big fuss? And I think it was only when this new finding about long COVID affecting younger people came out that more and more folks started to realise that this is more than just a disease that takes away older people. And so, at the beginning at least, it seemed like some really tough decisions were being made on behalf of people who were not going to live long anyway. And then thirdly, if you've got a situation which is consistently misrepresented by people in authoritative positions, people who've got a lot of political support. It's super hard to counter it. You know, we've had, ever since this started, a number of key leaders of democracies in our world basically saying that it's exaggerated, that it's a plot, that it's a scam, that it's fake. And it's kind of just gone on and on and on. And it undermines the people who are actually trying to do something reasonably useful. It makes them feel that they're going to get a kicking any time. And it emboldens those who actually want to deride anybody who's taking trouble, to the point where wearing a mask was something you got sneered for, or making a fuss about physical distancing was something that you would get told that was inappropriate. I don't think I want to underestimate just how corrosive that has been, and indeed continues to be.
So I know we're out at time, so I want to thank you both for the incredible amount of information you shared, Dr.